Hi everyone, it's me, Flipper's Paragraph, back with another review, this time of the 1968 Ingmar Bergman film Shame. So, I came across this movie while I was doing some research about Ingmar Bergman, because I really like his films. I mean, I haven't seen that many of his, but Autumn Sonata is in my top 10 favorite movies, easily. Persona is phenomenal. I still haven't been able to catch Wild Strawberries or Seventh Seal or any of those, but I will very soon, and I will review them. I'll watch them as soon as I can. And I just find him to be a very talented director. So I was doing research about him, and I came across Shame, which is a lesser-known film of his from the late 60s about war. And I had never seen him tackle war in one of his films. I'd seen him tackle sort of small conflicts like war, but never a full-blown war. I've never seen him work with like pyrotechnics or explosives or anything like that, and I was very interested to see what he'd do. So I saw Shame. And Shame is the story of this two musicians, this couple that runs a small farm in this rural city, in this rural state, in this rural country that is having a civil war. And they left their jobs as musicians in the big city to flee the war, and now the war has finally encroached upon their small town. So the film follows them as they try to escape the conflict in various ways, and it ultimately culminates in them taking a boat out to the ocean, where it's left ambiguous whether or not they actually survived or if they made it out or anything. So I personally enjoyed this film. It wasn't as great as I was expecting it to be. It's definitely the worst Ingmar Bergman film I've ever seen. But that's still high praise considering who Ingmar Bergman is and the work that he does. It's still a way above average film, and it really is very impressive still. I'll start with the script. The characters, the dialogue, the story. The characters are probably the least interesting Bergman characters, but still pretty interesting. I'm going to say that a lot during this review, that it's the worst for Bergman, but it's still really good, which is just my criteria because I've only ever seen like 6 or 7 Bergman films. So it's not like I have a huge range of knowledge about him, but I do have a substantial knowledge about him, I would say, and I've seen enough of his films to kind of know what I'm talking about. But he's such a fantastic director that even his worst movies are really, really extraordinary, and this is for sure his worst one that I've ever seen. It's miles below something like Autumn Sonata. And so the dialogue and the characters are still very beautiful. Are still extraordinarily beautiful. The main cast is Liv Ullmann and Max von Sydow, who are two regulars for Ingmar Bergman. And I love Liv Ullmann. I love her. I think she's a wonderful, extraordinarily talented actress. I think Max von Sydow is really, really good too. I think they're both extraordinarily talented, and I think they're both offering significant contributions to the art of performance. And especially in this movie, it's just a showcase of how well these characters act and how well these people can act. They really become their characters in almost everything they do. Max von Sydow's character, Jan, is kind of this wishy-washy has-been, and Liv Ullmann's character is this like strong, independent, tough woman. They swap a lot of gender roles in this film. For example, Max von Sydow's character is probably seen as more feminine, and Liv Ullmann's character is seen as a little bit more masculine. Max von Sydow's character, which isn't to say that either one is bad or either is weird or anything like that. It's just to say that it's different than what you'd expect from a foreign film from the 60s. You'd expect them to have that kind of well-defined gender roles and gender norms, but they kind of flop that, which I think is very progressive and very forward-thinking, and I think it's a testament to how well this film is aged. that it's still able to be that type of, reverse gender roles, and it works. It works extraordinarily well, I think. Both give an extremely believable performance. Save for a few unbelievable parts of the film, most of it is extraordinarily credulous and extraordinarily believable. There are some parts where a character will start to cry for seemingly no reason, where a character will fight another for seemingly no reason, will slap another for seemingly no reason. And it's because they're in a tumultuous marriage, but of course, there has to be some motivation for it, and it doesn't always feel like there's enough motivation for what they're trying to accomplish. One thing that the film is really good at from the very opening scene where Liv Ullmann and Max von Sydow wake up and have breakfast is that the film is very good at communicating relationships, where they communicate these ideas of love and marriage and hate and compromise between relationships. And it's a beautiful thing to watch. It's a beautiful thing to experience because it's just so well done. And it's so insightful into the human experience, and it's so insightful into human relationships that it's difficult not to just sit back and watch these relationships play out as if they were real relationships. It really does feel like they're in real relationships in this film. Every word, every interaction is just this beautiful, elegant tossing back and forth of dialogue, as if it's this force that they're giving and getting back and forth, instead of this idea of just words being tossed back and forth. It's more like this energy that's being washed back and forth, and it's just this extraordinary thing to watch happen at these dinner scenes, at these conversation scenes. They're just on the mark, hitting this energy back and forth, and it's just they're on the same wavelength. They know exactly what they're doing, and they're such talented performers, and it's such good writing that the relationships are communicated in this beautifully elegant way. As far as the technical aspects of the film go, the sound design was extraordinarily weak. It's one of the weaker aspects of the film. The explosions weren't nearly believable. There's a lot of sounds. There's especially a scene towards the end of the film where they're in a boat where it's just impossible to believe that they're really in the water, just because even though they are in the water, it's just the sounds of just like a little bit of splashing and then a long period of silence and then a little bit more splashing. It's ridiculous, and it's completely unbelievable. And I do think that when it comes to film, it's important to be believable. It's not as important to be realistic. Nobody cares about realism. What people give a shit about is whether or not you can believe that this is happening in the world of the film or not. I think that's what people care about at the end of the day. A few more aspects of the technicals that I thought were actually really good was, number one, the cinematography. There was a lot of really beautiful shots with interesting forms of movement. Like there would be these intense close-ups, like extreme close-ups on the characters' faces, and it would be super static, and then it would go down to their hands, or it would go back to another character, and everything just felt very claustrophobic and tight and compact. Like the whole movie was just like putting you in a pressure chamber, and it was really, really effective. And there was also some really good handheld cinematography too, which was very well coordinated and very well executed, which I thought was stellar, in my opinion. I thought it was very stellar. Another aspect that was really good were the pyrotechnics, especially for the era. They were very believable, despite they do that thing that every movie does, where it's like they'll have this huge explosion, and then they'll just toss some dirt onto the actors to have it look like that's what happened, to have it look like it happened in the same shot. It'll cut from the huge explosion to the actors on the ground going like this, and then some PA will toss dirt on them. And it doesn't work ever. But the pyrotechnics themselves looked real. They looked very real. They looked believable, especially you have to consider that this is 1968. In a foreign country, in Sweden, which at the time was relatively well developed, but not nearly as much as the United States, for example. But it it was very well done. It was very well done for the era and for the country of origin at the time. It was very well done. There are also some extremely passionate scenes in the film. Some really, really, really loving scenes that it was a joy to watch. Like, there's a scene where they talk about having children, and it's like watching just two regular people talk about having kids. Because not only is it so well performed, and so well shot, and so well acted, and so well choreographed, everything about it is just so heavenly and up in the air, and just masked in this haze of just wonderful delight that is extraordinary to watch. It's extraordinary to watch. It'll make you feel in love, this movie, at certain parts. It really does have that effect on you. It's a wonderful film, and it has that wonderful, wonderful effect on you. There are some interesting character moments in this film, some interesting character shifts. The way that they change, the way that they evolve is very radical and very precise, I would say. They change in very specific ways, and it's difficult not to watch, and especially on a second viewing, I would imagine, this film is... You would pick up on more minutia and more nuances and more just little details that are hidden in the character's development, in the character's growth. With a character like Jan and like Eva Rosenberg, they're just very specifically written. And they fit this archetype while still being their own original thing. They fit this archetype of the broken marriage while still being their own unique characters. And it's interesting to watch how they deviate from these archetypes and from these pre-established ideas. Some emotions in this film just aren't earned at all. Like, there's a scene where Jan slaps Eva, and it doesn't feel earned. The movie loses its sense of story towards the end, and this movie is one of those that I've said before many times, and I'll say a million times again. A movie just shits the bed at the ending. It happens. It's happened a million times. It'll happen a million more times. Movies just end up shitting the bed at the end. It's common. It's fine. I mean, it's not fine, but, it's fine. And this movie, it completely loses its sense of self by the end. It falls into this idea of Bergman movies and Bergman cinema that's like, oh, we have to have this dramatic ending. We have to have this final monologue. We have to have this. We have to have that. It just loses its own identity, which is sad because it had a really strong identity at the beginning. Shame was like its own thing. It was a Bergman war movie, and it was about this couple, and it was just about their deteriorating relationship, which, is a common theme within Bergman films. But to have it be centered around the Civil War was completely unique to Shame, I think. And it's a shame that it lost that while it went on. But I suppose it's not the worst thing in the world. The whole movie could have been shit. But gladly, it's only the ending that kind of loses itself. And it's not like a shit ending either. It's still a Bergman movie. It's still a quality ending. It's just bad for him, And I'm not going to give this movie like an 100% or like a 90% just because it's a Bergman movie or anything. That would be unfair. But I'm going to rate it objectively, and I'm going to rate it based on its quality. But I'm just comparing it to other Bergman movies, which I think is fair. I think it's entirely fair. I haven't seen Faust, for example. But if I saw Faust, I would compare it to Alice, because Alice was directed by the same guy as Faust. And I think it's fair to compare directors' works. It's not fair to say, like, oh, this is worse by his standards, therefore it's a worse movie in general. No, Shame is still a great movie. It's still a really good movie. I highly recommend it. But if you're a fan of Bergman, it's not going to be, like, up there with Persona and Wild Strawberries and Seventh Seal and Autumn Sonata, especially not Autumn Sonata. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about Shame. I would recommend this to Bergman fans. I would recommend this to pretty much anybody who wants to see a good drama. I would maybe recommend don't have high hopes for the ending and don't have high hopes for the sound. But besides that, it's a really, really well done movie. It's made with a lot of heart, a lot of craft, a lot of expertise went into this film, a lot of great performances, a lot of wonderful writing, fantastic directing. Fantastic directing. I don't usually talk about directing because it's one of those invisible crafts, kind of like production design or whatever. I mean, even production design is more evident than directing, but it's just something that goes completely unseen because good directing just means that you made a good movie. So I can't go like, oh, the directing was fantastic, but I can say that for this one because the movie had this like very clear and straightforward vision, and it had that drive that's missing from so many movies. It had that like passion erupting from itself that was just remarkable to see. And it was truly a wonderful experience to watch this movie. So I'm going to give it an 81%. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment. What should I review next? You guys tell me. Subscribe to the Patreon. Subscribe on Twitch. Let me know if I should do some streams. We can watch some movies together. And that's about it for me. I'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.